Welcome everybody. My name is Chris Benjamin. Welcome again to the Read Atlantic Voices series of videos. We're featuring prominent African Nova Scotian writers. We want to amplify their excellent work. I'm here once again with Sylvia Parris-Drummond, the CEO of the Delmore Daye Learning Institute. And we're very pleased today to have a chance to talk to Lindsay Ruck, who is an author of many nonfiction books, several biographies, and has a new book coming out soon. It's called Amazing Black Atlantic Canadians. So we're all looking forward to that book as well. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Sylvia and let her take it away.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I want to start by saying, are you able to, you're going to be profiling yourself in that book. Amazing, right? In terms of that. So we're so pleased that you're able to join us for this conversation today, to share with us your community experience, your connections in terms of where your stories weave into your life, because I know we have that connection in one piece that we'll be talking about, and where you see the publishing and author world for African Nova Scotian Black authors in this context. So I want to invite you to see this as a conversation, and maybe you could start by telling us a bit about your family, about your community here, and how that did weave into your author life.
Sure. So first, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm honored to be amongst such incredible authors that I admire myself. So I grew up in Dartmouth, and I lived there for 15 years. And then my father was appointed a position in Ottawa. So we moved there in high school. I was not happy about that. But I ended up staying there for about 12 years. And I did high school there. And then I took journalism at Carleton for 4 years, Carleton University in Ottawa. And then I eventually came home. This is home to me. Even when I was there, this was always home. So I knew I'd be back one day. And coming home actually coincided with the launch of my career as an author. Obviously, I did journalism, so in my mind, I was always going to do something with writing or broadcasting. And then being an author was just a dream for me. So going back, well, I lived in Dartmouth every Friday night and Sunday after church. My family would go to my grandparents' house. And we would have a meal with them. And it was non-negotiable. And I don't actually remember ever complaining about it, which is surprising as a kid, but that was something that we always did. And my grandparents, you know them quite well, are Calvin Ruck and Joyce Ruck. So they, to me, when you talk about community, are the best example of the strength and the importance of a community. They lived in Westfall, but their community was not geographical. It was the Prestons. It was North and East Preston, Lake Loudon, Cherrybrook. They spent a lot of time there. My grandfather was a human rights activist, a social worker, an author, a historian. He did quite a bit, and his time was mostly spent in those communities. So for my family, we attended a lot of events, a lot of church services. So when I started writing my first book, I'm tying everything together here in the story. When I started writing my first book called Winds of Change, which was a biography on my grandfather, I ended up, right when I moved back to Dartmouth, starting it, and then going back to those communities, going into people's homes and talking to them about their memories of my grandfather. And that was a really special time for me because I remember going there as a child. So being back and being welcome into these people's homes was incredible. If you ask my grandmother, every Black person is my cousin in one way or another. And I think you can probably relate to that. And whether that is true or not, they are like family, you know, and I think that's a sign of community. These people were my family and I hadn't seen them for a very long time, but they welcomed me with open arms. And then I remember when I had the book launch for that book, Winds of Change in 2014, the amount, and I still get emotional thinking about it, the amount of people that showed up for that launch. They were lined up outside the door. It was a launch at a church in Dartmouth. And I knew they weren't there for me. And I know that sounds humble, but they weren't there for me. They were there because they were our community. You know, they were my grandfather, my grandmother's community. And that's what community does. You show up, you know, you support, you're loyal, and seeing those people all there together was just amazing to me. And that was kind of my aha moment, if you will, of that is what community is. And that is the support I've received for my writing. And so I'm so grateful that my grandparents and my parents showed me what it means to have a community. And it's not necessarily geographical, although obviously it's not that far away from where we lived, but they are family. And that was so important to me. I'm so appreciative of that community and of my grandparents for just opening that up to me. And the support I received through my writing is because of the importance of community.
I really love how you've showed us how we carry our home in our heart. So physically, geographically, where we live is one thing, but yeah, our home is in our heart, right? It goes with us, and the valuing of intergenerational being, right, together. I mean, I feel like those times as well, and I know that when folks hear you talk about this, they'll feel the same. You know, how those Sunday times together, right? Important family times for sharing, you know, information about our history and our heritage and about, you know, ways of being and behaving. So there's all of that happens in that sharing a meal together time, stuff together. So I really appreciate you raising that up for us. And I wonder about during your times living away from home, was there times that you needed to journal for yourself or write to yourself? Was there things that you've done deliberately to help hold those memories?
Yeah, I mean, for me, writing is always my go-to. If I'm feeling happy, if I'm feeling sad, if I just need to express myself, writing is my outlet. And it will always be that way. I wake up in the morning, I want to write. Before I go to bed, I want to write. And it's how I best express myself. This conversation obviously is great. And so far, I don't think I've jumbled up my words, but on paper for me is where I'm most confident. So when I was away, that was when I started writing the book about my grandfather, and where I also started writing a lot of other different things, just kind of thinking one day, you know, this could become something. So it's a great way, writing is a great way to kind of immortalize a moment or a person or a feeling. So I absolutely have notebooks full of ideas and feelings of just being in Ottawa and that experience, and then coming back here, and it's all written on paper somewhere. I'm sure my husband would love me to get rid of some of that paper because I'm someone who needs the paper and pen. You know, I don't necessarily go to my laptop. I do everything, which is a really slow process for publishers, but I need to write it on paper. So I absolutely have many a notebook full of just my feelings of what's going on in my life. And when we moved, I was a teenager. So at that point, I was just writing about why am I here? I obviously grew to love it because I stayed for quite some time, but writing definitely is always the outlet for me.
Yeah, we've heard that a bit of a theme as well for some of the other folks we spoke to. So it's really kind of affirming to hear that in terms of kind of developing your writing. And I think what I hear and what you say as well is you know, trusting your voice, right? So that your stories, your voice stories emerge and they have a place, and what I hear you say as well, they'll have a time. So I do look forward to some of those stories continue to be available for us. We'll hold you to that. You know, the pieces of works for sure. And you know, connecting with the comment in terms of the writing in the, that must have had, I guess, some of the issues that you would have been hearing about, or that may have came out in terms of the writing and winds of change. So is there some pieces that might have resonate for you now, and maybe in this day and time with things that are happening, do you feel there might be some things that showed up in the stories or in the developing of the stories that resonate now?
Yeah, I mean, we've been racism and civil rights movements, this is not new. You know, we've been fighting the good fight for a very long time. And many a times as the Black Lives Matter movement began to grow, I have sat with a paper and pen trying to express what I was feeling. And sometimes I just cry, sometimes I get angry, especially now with children. I have a little girl and a little boy, and thinking about the world I want them to live in and what I'm going to tell them about this time, because I want them to know about this time. We need to be talking about these things, even when it's uncomfortable. They're too young to understand now, but I was trying to think of things that I've written about and the experiences my grandfather had, the experiences my father had as Black men growing up in Nova Scotia are very different from the experiences that I had. I experienced racism, there's no doubt about it, and I still do, you know, comments here and there, and not looking like any of your friends in your school growing up, and I had those comments, but it's so far from what my grandfather and my father experienced, and all of that is in the book Winds of Change, and it made me realize how grateful I am, because the work that they did now is a reflective of the life that I live, and I'm very lucky. And while there is still racism, it's people like my grandfather said, no, we're not going to put up with this, is why I get to live the life that I live. And so I really wanted that in the book. It's all throughout, you know, his work in social justice and human rights. It's there because it's important, and people need to know he was, when it comes to kings and queens, he wasn't anyone special in that regard. You know, he was a simple man who wasn't pleased with the status quo and who wanted to make a difference. And that can be anyone, you know, that could be you or I. So I absolutely, my writing reflects kind of the times and what is going on in the world. And it's relevant to today, especially with everything that's happening. And I think that's why it's so great that we have conversations like this, and that there are people who are writing down what is happening right now, because we want this to be remembered and to be talked about. I've said it so many times now, we want this to be a movement and not a moment, you know. This needs to stick this time, you know. We need to not just make this a thing and make it trendy. People need to understand that things are happening, things are changing, and that's why writing them down is so important. So again, it's immortalized, and people remember how far we've come and what still needs to be done.
Yeah, and that, you know, in the sharing of the contributions, right, and the strengths of community is important pieces as well. And so I think, you know, for me, the importance of the number 2 construction, the Black Battalion, right? You know, that fact and human story, right? And I hear you saying that as well in terms of the writing of the story that we're referencing here. Like, those pieces are really important, the humanness of it and the facts. So we know our heritage, we know our culture, we know our history. I think it's really important in that. And I know that you have been involved in various ways in mentorship and encouragement for folks in this role. And I'm wondering about 2 aspects of that. You know, what kinds of questions or comments you might get from folks, and how that has an impact on you and going forward with your continued writing.
Right. I still find it strange when someone looks to me as a mentor, because I still have so much learning and growing to do, and there's so many people that I respect and look up to, just with how long I've wanted to be a writer, and just that kind of dream for me. it's such an honor, and it's so humbling to think that people will look to me just for advice or editing. So I don't take it lightly, certainly. And when people do approach me about helping them with different projects, I really want them to know that it's their project. I'm there as a guide, and just to help them through it. But there's projects that people are working on that are so important right now. When we talk about this, what we're doing, your voices, I think, is the theme. And you always want to make sure that their voice comes through, even as the mentor. You know, it's not my work, it's theirs, and I'm just there in the background. And I love working with people because they bring new ideas, fresh ideas, that I maybe never would have even thought of. So it's really a two-way street. Even though I'm talking to them perhaps as a mentor, I'm learning so much from them as well. So it really goes both ways. And I love just working with other writers and being able to spend that time with them and learn from them as well.
What, I'm just curious in terms of when would you maybe identify might be the right word, when you had a chance to kind of come to know or be familiar with African Nova Scotian Black authors here from the Atlantic?
So I told this story when I was doing an event, I think it was maybe last year at the Delmore Daye Learning Institute for Maxine Times. Last year.
That time is flying.
That's crazy. So it was an event to celebrate her life and her work, and I was so excited to be asked to be a part of it, because for me, Maxine Times was the reason I had the confidence to start writing. I was brought to the Alderney Public Library. Maxine Times, who has since passed on, she was doing a reading at the time, and my sister, with Jacqueline, was interested in writing. So I was just kind of the tag-along kid who was there, and not really paying attention. And all of a sudden, Maxine started to read one of her poems, and immediately I was just captivated by her. And I think I was around 7 at the time. Her voice, the way she strung words together. I necessarily didn't understand everything she was saying, but I knew it was important. And I knew that everyone in that room was so captivated by her and was just so touched by her that I immediately went home and started filling notebooks with poems and ideas. And I just felt so empowered by her writing. And that moment has stuck with me, because I really do credit that moment to my writing career today. And also huge thank you to my mother, because she is the one who took my sister and I to these different events. We were very young. There weren't a lot of kids there. But for my mother, it was always about the experiences and being part of different things and learning and knowing that there are different people in this world and different cultures and races, and to really learn about all of those things. So that was my moment where I knew I wanted to do what she was doing. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but it gave me the confidence. And I mean, since then, my grandfather, who wrote the book, The Black Battalion, he was a huge mentor for me as a writer. Obviously, he was my easy access. I could talk to him anytime I wanted, which was wonderful. And I wrote the foreword for the 30th anniversary edition of his book. And to see both of our names on the cover of that book, it was, I have a 6-month-old and I'm very little sleep, so I'm emotional already.
I think we're all the feeling that must be for you.
Right? Yeah. So it's the emotion I feel when I look at that cover is just incredible, because again, he was not only my grandfather, but he was a mentor. He was someone I aspired to be like. So those are the two people in my mind that stand out. And now there's someone like Shantae Grant, who's doing incredible things, especially for young readers, that I admire so much, because she's so good at presenting these stories in a way that kids want to learn more and to find out more. And even just saying your hair is beautiful. I mean, that book is something I want my daughter to read every day. She has beautiful curly hair, and I want her to embrace that fully. So I so appreciate authors who are just it can be so simple, but they're making such a difference through their words. So those are really the people that I look to on a daily basis for my writing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for bringing my memory back to that time when we were here celebrating Maxine Times. It was so powerful, your piece in terms of the personalizing it and what we read her pieces. And spoken word, because that's an interesting for me as well, is seeing the intertwining of spoken word, poetry, prose, like they're all there, providing different access ways, into narratives, different ways of expressing whatever, right? So thank you for that. It was a glorious time. You're right. Yeah, it definitely was for that. And I mean, as well too, with authors like Shantae and those, again, the community stories and the personal stories. I mean, I think they're children's stories, but I think a lot of us have them on our shelves for ourselves, right? To look and to use, and and somewhat like as your writings as well, that we are very hopeful that they're in the school system and accessible to folks as well, so that they can not just be picked up and read at home where we want them to be, but also be a shared experience, for conversation, and for story itself, of course, as well as encouraging to write and to write on. And so we had mentioned, Lindsay, at the start there, that you have a book that's due to come out. I think I saw January of 2021.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I want to just invite if there's any comment or advance that we can have here, or any of your other books that you'd like to do any reading from or share any kind of more kind of content details from. I'd like to invite you to do that now if you.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm really excited about this book. I've always wanted to write for younger readers. I started with nonfiction for obviously adults, and I loved that because it's a huge responsibility to write about someone else's life. I didn't take it lightly at all, and you have to get all the facts straight, and which is very daunting. But I always wanted to write for kids. So this book, it kind of started as an idea where I wanted to present the Black Battalion to younger readers, to kids. And that's how I pitched it at first. So I was really excited when Nimbus Publishing wanted to take it one step further and add it to their series about amazing people. So a book has already come out about amazing kids, written by John Tatry. So no, sorry, not John Tatry. That's not right. I can't. John Boileau. Sorry, too many John. John Boileau. Yeah. John Tatry just had another book. So I'm confused. So this would be part of that series, and this one is Amazing Black Atlantic Canadians. And I really wanted to make it accessible to as many kids as possible, in that it's not just words on a page. There will be beautiful illustrations, but there will also be text boxes and a glossary at the back of words that maybe they've never heard before. Things like discrimination or things that maybe would trip them up. They can go to the back of the book and find what that's about. And there'll be kind of did you know fun facts. So it's really visually pleasing, but you're also learning a lot. So my hope is that kids will learn so much from it, and it'll be a reference. It's hard to include everything. We are bursting with so much Black history, and there's so many stories out there that this is really kind of a jumping off point, and can kind of guide kids along to make them curious and find out more. So I'm excited. We're in the final editing stages now, hopefully. And I'm really excited to see the finished product, because I think it could be great for kids.
Well, for me too, I'm looking forward to learning. It's Atlantic, right? So I'm looking forward to learning, from other provinces. I said, I think I heard that Misha is going to be in there.
Yes, she is.
Is that right?
Yeah,
who was like, one of the so fabulous performers. And I was just reminiscing a bit before about, my experience with her with the Nova Scotia Mass Choir, how generous she was with engaging with us and with, stories. So I'm totally looking forward to hearing her as well as the others that I can imagine be there. But I think that's a wonderful contribution to be thinking about that perspective. So thank you for taking up that story for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're kind of moving towards close, and so I wanted to do, of course, give you kind of an opportunity to any kind of comments or any encouragement you'd like to share out for folks before we do that, before we close out. So
sure. I guess I just really want to thank you guys for doing this, and I want to thank you for not doing it in February. So, and I was just thinking, February is my busiest month.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and just let me preface this by saying African Heritage Month is wonderful. And I think it's great that there's a time where we celebrate all the contributions and all the wonderful stories that we have to share. But it's 1 month, and the special books come out during that month, and then they go away March 1st. So for me, the biggest kind of call to action or what have you that came out of thinking about we're doing this now, I think is we can talk about these things all year round. This doesn't have to be a conversation we have in February because Black people are trending. This is something that we can talk about anytime. So I think it's great that you guys are doing this now. And you think about history in schools. I mean, history is talked about all year round, But when I was growing up, I wasn't learning about Africville. I wasn't learning about the Black Battalion. I wasn't learning about Viola Desmond. Things would come up in February, and because I was a minority in my class, it felt very directed to me. This is for you now. So the fact that if we could have these conversations all year round, and not just make it a thing because the calendar says so, I think that would be wonderful. And just let's not let those books get dusty. Let's keep them out. Let's not put them away in a special box. Let's keep them out and keep learning about those books and talking about them all year round. So that's my, not rant, if you will, but what came to mind when I thought, oh, we're doing this now. This is great. I think that's wonderful. So yeah, thank you to you guys.
Thank you. That's very encouraging, and I think people again are, when they hear that, it's going to resonate with them, right? That whole idea and the issues that are addressed, are also the opportunity to think in a broader context, whatever the stories that are there, the importance of voice and community and addressing issues and taking up space in a way that is inclusive, not overwhelming. All of those things are out there for us broadly, I think, to think about. So yeah, I think that's really a really important point to make, and thank you for doing so. And we're really glad that you could, as you said, two things I want to draw back to. You said, you didn't say this, but you are a busy mom. So I really appreciate that you're continuing that work, and I love your listening to you talk and tell your story. So, if there's I don't know if there's kind of, audio type, not just the audio of your books, which may or may not be there, but yeah, this presence here and telling it, because you really have shared with us story and emotion. And I think that that's really important. So thank you so much for making the time.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for including me. I appreciate it.